You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارشتايجر.
Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Wasn't a good day in sports for me yesterday, Kevin.
It was a tough day, as much as I know you had all your hopes up at Rogers Stadium last night, Rogers Center, and the Canoe as well. Both were, let's just say, put it that way, 3-4-0, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, 3-0 in a baseball game is not really the worst. Although it was not to make this a baseball show. We're probably going to do another baseball show to preview the World Series in a little bit. But full credit to the Cleveland team. They absolutely were dominant, particularly in their bullpen. This isn't a baseball show, so we won't go any further than that. But I answered a question in my life. It is more soul destroying to watch things in person when your team is eliminated than it is to watch it on TV. Because on TV, I just turn the TV and walk away and put something else on it instantly. Whereas I had to walk out of that stadium like a zombie with the rest of the zombies, and you had to watch Cleveland celebrate in front of you, and it was kind of anyway.
How would you have felt being at Canoe yesterday, Duane? How would you have reacted?
Yeah, I would have been at Camp Nou, so that would have been something. I would have been in Barcelona. I could have just went and had a drink after Barcelona, and that would have been fine. It's a beautiful city. But no, look, we have it on our block to talk a little bit about this in detail in a bit. Maybe we'll just do it now. Look, they were doing fine until the red card, obviously. And I did watch both games. I watched the City game on tape delay for those that are curious how I did this. So I knew the score going in, so I kind of watched it a little more analytical than I thought. And I thought that they were holding their own pretty well, considering they are playing as what I believe to be the most talented team in the world. Apologies to Real Madrid, but nonetheless.
I have to agree with you, especially in the second half. Once the other red card went on the other side, once Jérémy Mathieu took 2 yellows in the span of 32 seconds and being sent off at the 73rd minute around that time, then you had City settling in a little bit more, be able to control the game. And yes, obviously the score was already decided and the game was decided, but you had a player like Raheem Sterling, which actually was impressive at Canoe. His space, his ball control, able to overlap the defenders and create opportunities. Sterling was impressive once the game was decided.
Yeah, well, score effect and all that sort of stuff too, obviously. But as you said, quickly on the Bravo stuff, when he was signed, Pep said that he would make mistakes and that they would live with those mistakes for what he brings to the quality of the game. And that's a frustrating thing for a fan to completely wrap their head around, because
so for yesterday, Duane, sorry to interrupt, but it's Claudio Bra.
There you go. Look, I don't actually blame him for the hand in isolation. I don't blame him for taking the red card. Where the blame lies is giving the ball up the way he did to put himself in the position where if he doesn't do that, the goal goes in and the game's probably over, right? At that point, it's only 1-0. Keep that in mind, folks. So he does what he does, like 10 yards out of the box. So there's no doubt about the call.
Like, I'm going to, oh no, what did I do?
Well, no, yeah, but like I said, it to me, it's equatable to Suarez at the World Cup, that he did something knowing he was going to get a red card, but trying to save his team. The difference is that Suarez, it worked for him, right? That's why everyone hates that, is because it worked and they view him as a cheater and all that. But he paid the punishment that he was supposed to at the time. Not to revisit something from 2010, but nonetheless, that's what happened there.
Well, it's kind of like that red card, the yellow card that you take once you're the last defender to stop that goal opportunity, and the free kick will be really far from the goal, but you had that chance and you took that decision. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. It was a red card that needed to happen at that exact second. What didn't need to happen was for him to give the ball up like that, and that's the style that they want to play. They want their keeper with the ball at the feet. That's why they got rid of Joe Hart. A lot of English observers are not used to watching a keeper that is that aggressive with the ball, that is that inclined to get involved like a defender.
That takes a little bit more risk than they're used to. Usually when you have a keeper, you ask him to do the easy pass. If he's not going to boot it, he does the pass to the defender or the one open player close to him that has nobody close to 20 yards, and you give him the ball. When you actually give passes that are more intricate, more risky in a way that needs more thought behind it and more accuracy for the pass, yeah, people do see it as maybe too much risk, or they're not used to it, is the better way, like you mentioned it.
Yeah, and look, he's going to make mistakes, and that's what he said. And even the best guys that do that are going to make mistakes. But the question is whether, at this state of City's development, whether it makes sense to sort of put Bravo in there and hope he grows and becomes more skillful at what he's doing, becomes even more impressive keeper. And I talk to people like Chileans, especially, that love this guy, that think that he's got a really, really, really high ceiling, and that he will eventually grow to become a player that City fans love. But obviously, he's also replacing a player that City fans is beloved at City. Joe Hart was. Yeah. He was City. He was the modern City in many ways. That sort of bravado. He's like a lad. Everyone loves him. He's funny, all that sort of stuff. And for him to be shown the door the way he was, it still kind of rubs people the wrong way. So that's going to amplify the mistake that Bravo made yesterday. But ultimately, look, 4-0 is not ideal. City's going to take some... They're going to need to mentally recover quickly because they have them in 2 weeks again, and that's what it's going to come down to. And they're going to have it with Willie in goal. So God help us all.
Caballero de Chile, a very, very bad wine.
Yes, there you go.
Well, okay. He was that penalty save from Neymar. Let's just face it, Neymar really didn't hit a nice penalty, and Caballero was quite ordinary in the game yesterday.
Well, he's a backup keeper. And he's a good backup keeper in the sense that he's a guy that is a good-natured guy that just loves to be at the club, that appreciates the opportunities that he gets. He's not going to make waves, so that's kind of what you want as a backup keeper. You leave Joe Hart there as the backup. That might be the other argument people are making. Well, why don't you just put Joe in the club? Well, it's just going to be a distraction all year because it's going to be, well, should Joe play? And no, you need a clear distinction. I believe in that because especially in soccer, the keeping position is such a unique one in the sense that there's no need to rotate your keepers at all, right? So you might as well have a clear distinction that way and have a guy that's a good, quote unquote dressing room guy. And I think that's what Willie is. So, and he did well in the League Cup final last year. Stopped penalties, was the hero of that day, and that was good. He said that was his highlight of his time of his career to win that cup for City. And I think for City fans, they thought that would be the last highlight they saw of him. They didn't anticipate he'd still be around, but he's going to get some opportunities now in the Champions League. So there you go.
Duane, this being our Soccer Today show, it's our soccer show, and we do transition from one to the other. So let's go from Barcelona, Man City to Vancouver and talk about a question and app with Caps owner yesterday.
Yeah, Jeff Mallett, who's one of the Caps owners. Caps have several owners. The Whitecaps ownership is notoriously close-lipped. They don't actually make a lot of public statements. So there was a really remarkable work done by Mark Weber in the province to get this one-on-one with him. He sat down with him for quite a while. There's a 2-part interview out there that's available on the province website. You should go check it out. But there's a lot of really interesting things to unpack in this, and you could probably fill up a few shows, but we'll dedicate 10 minutes to it and encourage you to go look at that. I mean, one of the things, like I said, it goes through a lot, and they talk in the first part of this a lot about sort of what went wrong this year and talking about they signed a lot of their core players to long-term deals, and Mallett sort of suggesting that this, although they didn't purposely do it, that a lot of the Whitecaps players kind of relaxed mentally. They were a little bit less intense than they might have been pre-contract. That's something that we hear a lot about in sports. Talks about not communicating to these players. This is what I found one of the more interesting things in this, Kevin, and maybe I'll get your opinion on this, is that he said that they have an idea of what it means to be a Whitecap, and that's kind of rhetoric in a sort of sports team way that, the white cap way and blah, blah, blah. But that feels that maybe the club didn't do a great job at communicating to some of these guys what exactly that meant, so that they would come up here in their interviews prior to being signed and they say, oh, yeah, no, I buy in. But then they get here, and at least in the beginning, and they talk a lot about the slow start that they had, that they didn't fully buy in. They didn't understand what it was they were being asked for. And there was an interesting line in the interview where they kind of went, oh, this is a fully professional club, which sort of suggests to me that you have guys coming up here that have this attitude or understanding that's incorrect of what MLS is.
Yeah. Then
they get up here and they go, oh, shoot, I got to do more. And then maybe they pick it up from there because they're professionals, but their intensity was lacking at the start of the year. So the Whitecaps are looking to address that in the season ahead, Kevin.
It's intriguing when you see who is left for the club, who has departed the club this year, and you're trying to make a line between those two dots. No, it's interesting. And, you mentioned how it goes back maybe to the attitude or the perception that Major League Soccer or Canadian teams in Major League Soccer could have abroad, which we all know it's not the case anymore. But back then, it was maybe more close to reality that fully professional, yes, they were, but it wasn't to the extent that it is since Major League Soccer.
Yeah, look, and here's an interesting one. I'm not going to read this directly a lot, but I am going to read this answer. They asked them about what they did in the summer window. Because at that time, if you remember, they weren't completely buried, but it was, if you listen back to the archives of this show, we've been talking about it since July that this team, something was wrong, right? And it was pretty clear, obviously, to them anyway. But there was a question that Mark asked them, and I'll read this directly. You had a window in the summer to decide whether you try and salvage the season or ride it out until January. Do you regret not doing more? The answer Mallet gave was some things were unexpected. Rivero wanted to move back to Chile. And it goes back to what I said. Who is a Whitecap? I loved him. He was great for us, but he wanted to go back. We didn't expect it. So that's kind of surprising to me that came out of the blue that Rivero asked to leave, which could speak to stuff that was going on. Continuing with Mallet's words, though. Kudo went down injured. Chichera, we expected more out of, and he started to come in a bit. In that time when we had the window, we felt we had enough. We added a couple guys to get stuck in, Edgar and DeYoung. So, again, a lot of Whitecaps fans were screaming for more offensive help to be put in there. Sounds to me that they just felt that they had enough already, and then the Kudo injury was something that's surprising. You can't control injuries, obviously, although I think at this point in time, the Kudo signing can rightly be seen as a bit underperforming. He'll have to step it up next year, I would suspect. But the Rivero stuff interests me that it came out of the blue, because I don't know if I necessarily got that messaging at the time.
Same for the Spindola, though. Spindola would finish to be Giles Barnes for Vancouver.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on there to think. And to me, reading that, what I take out of that is that the Whitecaps simply didn't evaluate what they had correctly. And I find this interesting throughout, is that, and it stands to reason that Mallet's going to say these things this way, that he's sort of deflecting a lot of the blame. He's accepting some of the blame himself and in the ownership group in the way that ownership groups often do, in this sort of half-assed way. But by and large, they're mostly suggesting the players are underperforming, and that was the problem. And if the players perform well, then maybe things will be different.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned maybe they overestimate. It's a question that Mark did ask to Mr. Mallet. Did you guys overestimate the quality that was on this team? And the answer was no. They thought they were maybe okay with the progression, with a third place finish last year, and okay with the progression heading into this year. And obviously they got stuck in a hole they could get out of. But that's how important the preseason is in Major League Soccer. Well, not preseason, but I mean the beginning of the season, the March to May. You cannot win the league, but you can create a gap that down in the stretch to see if you make the playoff or no. It's going to be that gap, the difference.
Yeah. This one, my Torontonian ire got up with a little bit of a question the way they answered it in the second half, because they can't help themselves sometimes out west. They like to get their Toronto disses in. And, even though apparently we're not one of their rivals, he decided to answer a question this way. Mark asked them, is the club's model correct? Right. He answered, we're fundamentally more FC Dallas than we are Toronto FC. Whitecaps FC2 have shown they can compete and win in USL. Our academy teams have done well in the USSDA. We're going across Canada with our academies now. We will find players. We will develop players. Is a model that works. I think the one area we have to keep an eye on is our model in regards to designated players. Is our approach for those types of players right? That's an area we're scrubbing really hard on. I just love the diss to TFC as if TFC doesn't have an academy. Folks, if I were a Whitecaps, I know in the Whitecaps, sorry, Captain, go ahead.
To be the devil's advocate, I didn't take it that way. I just take it for him to try to illustrate a team with a high-paid DP. And, well, it's kind of easy to pinpoint Toronto for that matter because you have the FC Dallas, which is the academy system, and Toronto FC, not talking about the academy here, but with 3 big DPs. So you kind of have maybe that going on. So I didn't understand. I didn't take it as a diss on the academy, though.
Fair enough. What I will say, though, if I'm a Whitecaps fan, they probably laugh a little bit at that comparison, and they do like to hold that up. You know, we're smarter than you, so you're going to need to spend the money. And sure, you're beating us now, but we're smarter than you. That's kind of an attitude that you hear a lot from a lot of teams that don't spend big money on the DP side of things. But this league, as I've said many times before, is increasingly becoming one where you're going to need to spend big money on the DP side if you want to keep up. And yes, you could find some outliers like Dallas. So Dallas has some really damn talented guys that they brought in too. That's smart scouting too, and it's more than just developing your players. So, you know, if I'm a Whitecaps fan and I think about this one, I might go, you know what, maybe we should be a little bit more like Toronto FC, a little bit more like the LA Galaxy, a little bit more like the Seattle Sounders, if we want to actually do something, because ultimately it's been showing that they were wanting this year, and that's where I would come down on that. And I think that if you look further, there's also the province. Mark's paper ran a poll where they were asking whether they were happy with the way the management was running this team, and clearly, the results were, and this is not a scientific poll, it's an online poll, and anyone could vote on it. Hell, I could have voted 15 times. You don't know. I didn't, but I could have. The bottom line is there does seem to be some discontent within the Whitecaps fans now, which is more so than it has been in the past when it comes to sort of that sort of approach that they have there.
No, so very interesting article. So theprovince.com, look in the sports section and the soccer section, you will find this article that is a Q&A with Whitecaps co-owner Mallet. It'll be very interesting to see because they mentioned they were scrutinizing how they approach DP. Duane. And you know what? It's the one thing we've been talking about this season, especially with the DP slot that Major League Soccer does give you. You're trying to get more value. And what's more valuable than goals in this league? Since, yes, how you concede is important, but it's how many you score. So the fact that their DPs hasn't been their a production of between 15 to 20 goal, which is once you quantify it, that's what brings the best result. We've seen teams like Toronto, Montreal, and LA that when a striker or a midfielder in that DP range scores that amount of goal, well, usually you make the playoff and you have a run for it. So that's what's been missing. And yes, we've saying that they were close to the amount of goals scored this year and last year. It's the conceded, yes, but if you add another 15, it's another day and another story altogether.
Yeah, real quickly as a final thought, we are going to take a break and dedicate the last 40 minutes of the show to the USL for the USL Cup final preview. We have 2 great guests booked for the second half. Kevin and I are going to discuss the final a little bit in general terms for the 10 minutes prior to that. But there's another question I wanted to just look at real quick, and it talks about the makeup of the team. And for a long time, the Whitecaps have been Team Central America. They find that that's the area where they want to look for players. So Mark asked them whether they felt that they were going. I'm sorry, I'll give the exact question here. Has this season made you rethink at all how you scout players, where you scout players, or the mix of the team? Mallet's answer, it's a great question. We've talked about it in our last couple of management sessions. We like our approach. We still think that Central and South America is probably the best value. It goes on. That's an interesting question to me, because for a long time, a lot of people have suggested that's not a new thing. That's not a unique thought within Major League Soccer, that you can get cheaper players down there. Maybe you can find a little value down there. I think, though, when you look at the whole interview as a whole, and you hear him talk about players coming in and not really understanding what it means to be in Major League Soccer, I would question whether you want to go so all in on just Central Americans and South Americans, or whether you want to maybe decide, and what do we talk about all the time, Kevin? MLS lifers, right?
Yeah, the veterans, yeah.
Whether they need to maybe not give up on going down and looking hard at Central America and South America, because there's truth to the idea, there's good value there, but to maybe also open their minds up a little bit more to American players, to guys that have been in the league for a long time. Obviously, I'd prefer them to be Canadian, but nonetheless, I understand the value from an MLS roster perspective that probably, that mid-range American is a guy that they might need to bring in. Look how Toronto has reinvented themselves in the offseason to be one of the top defensive teams in the East this year, and we'll see what they do in the playoffs. It was by bringing in those guys. It was by
Drew Moore and etc.
Yeah, Drew Moore and Will Johnson and guys like that are MLS lifers, that are those core guys. And maybe you don't get them as cheaply as you're going to find some young Central American, but I think probably, and I do believe this, the Whitecaps would benefit from having a bit of a greater mix in their makeup next year, Kevin. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back, and Kevin and I will discuss the USL Cup final as we start USL Wednesdays.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back to USL Wednesdays, which is Thursday this week. Figure that one out, folks.
Which is Thursday, and we'll be talking about it today and probably a little bit tomorrow as well. So it's more than usual, but it's worth it because it's the USL Cup weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Alan Henkel and Christian Dyer, which are the two guests that we'll have in the second half of the show. Christian Dyer is a writer for Big Apple Soccer. He does a lot of the color commentary for their YouTube streams there, and Alan is the PA announcer at the Swell Park home game. So two guys that have seen a lot of their respective teams, the two teams in the finals. Of course, a lot of Canadian content on the Swell Park side. If you're a Canadian fan out there, you're probably cheering for Swell Park because it's Mark DeSantos' team. You've got Johnny Grant that's gone out there and played a few minutes for them this year as well. So you got some Canadian content to cheer for in this final. Kevin, I guess the other talking point, and this is something that on our USL shows that we have really spent a lot of time exploring the last little while, and it's worth exploring again. It's like the idea that 3 of the 4 teams were 2 teams that made it to the final, and the 2 teams in the final are ultimately 2 teams, 1 team in its first season. Is this going to be the trend moving forward?
Yeah, very interesting too, because there was a backlash as well online from standalone team fans that feel their league has been hijacked with teams that have different incentive, different budget, different feel to them, and they feel like their league has been hijacked. But it's interesting because it means more soccer, it means more. There's a lot of point of views and perceptions you can choose to take on this side. What I feel is fascinating is you were in a league. We'll take the Batteries, the Rhinos, the Independents of this world. They were playing in a certain way. They were used to doing things in a certain way. And now you have teams coming in that are openly questioning and challenging how they should approach this project, and on the pitch using it as experiments as well. And we've seen results this year from those teams. We've seen some in the past with the Galaxy 2 last year with a great run, and Seattle 2 as well. This year, it's Swole Park, it's a Red Bull. It's a hybrid of how to approach this USL project with the MLS 2 side, where they don't necessarily go full all out young. They do have a bigger transit of reserves from the first team to the second team, and they do have a young core of player that grows and help achieve and learn more in that season. And in Swole Park and in New York Red Bulls, if you take their last games, a few recent games, or at the beginning of the game, you see a progression in tactical awareness, in how they play as a team. Mark Dos Santos were able to create a very solidly defensive team that's not afraid to go forward and pass the ball and control it. It's very interesting to watch tactically how those 2 teams evolved this year, and that has to do with the involvement of the first team, obviously.
Yeah. There's a lot of things to unpack with that question. And like, first, to address the point that you made off the top, is that there are certain fans out there that feel, quote unquote, that their league's been hijacked. I think that for them, and if I can sort of put myself in their head for a moment, that the area that they might have the most concern with isn't necessarily the 2 teams, if they think about it. It's the affiliate side of it. that you have these teams that have operated independently for years that suddenly are now operating as an affiliate program for an MLS team, and they have these players being parachuted in. Perhaps you have, coaches in the ear of their coaches at the level, at the independent level. So they may feel that their clubs aren't as independent anymore. And they're also seeing their age of their team, their average age, the average amount of experience of their standalone teams dropping. So to me, there's a natural way around that. I think that the evolution of USL as a development model for MLS is the fully owned and operated development teams. And I think that I like the Swope Park model a little bit more, having seen it firsthand here in Toronto for a couple of years. I like the idea of having a little bit of separation, although Swope Park's just it's quite interesting actually. Swope Park's this massive urban park in Kansas City. So it's actually in Kansas City, but it has its own separate identity and sort of branding attached to it. And I kind of like that a little bit better than the TFC2, New York Red Bulls 2, FC Montreal kind of bit. Well, FC Montreal's bit different branding, but it's pretty close.
Well, they're using the same facilities. It's the second team of the Montreal Impact, FC Montreal. So yes, it's a different branding on the crest, on the kit, but it's a second team of the Montreal Impact.
Yeah, but the point, to me, I think that FC Montreal, TFC2, TFC2 when it first came out, they talked about playing the games in Kitchener-Waterloo. For those that don't know, Kitchener-Waterloo is an hour west of Toronto. So it's a fairly big city. It's a center of 1 million people. So it obviously has enough population base that if they made it their own and branded it their own, they might have been able to get more people out there. I think there's more inherent pressure if you have 2,000 people, 3,000 people coming to every game as opposed to 200, which is what happens now, right? So I kind of like that model a little bit more. But in terms of the standalone stuff, to get back to my original thought, Kevin, I think that there is probably a little loss there. And I would like to see more of those standalone teams sort of scrapping the idea that they're development models and instead embracing the ideas that they're fully professional teams that are representing that community and trying to win, to get a little bit older, to get a little bit more, cutthroat about it, and to perhaps spend a little bit more money to represent that. And I think that if the NASL, some of those teams do move over, that might help alleviate this movement towards the two teams rising to the top, Kevin.
Yes, absolutely. But again, it's when you have a different perception of the game, how to get ready, and different perception of budget. We're not talking about big difference here, but enough that your higher players are not necessarily part of your own little system. Like example, the Rochester Rhino. We've seen Bob Lilly go from last year having a championship winner, made a lot of offseason, go a lot younger this year. And yeah, they went to the playoff. They got a victory, and then they lost in the conference final against New York Red Bulls. But the model was to reflect maybe the other two teams do. And so it does influence these standalone teams, how they do approach USL now as well. Some of them will find this as a way to go younger, trying to get players in their different stage of progression. So late bloomers might be able to find easier spot for them in the standalone teams because the younger ones would be part of the academies and will already be considered for USL at 18. So no, it's funny how that whole thing influences standalone team as well as MLS 2 size.
All right. Got to take the break now. We're going to get the Swope Park guest on the line. We'll be back after this quick little break. Might be a minute and a half or so this time, so bear with us if it takes longer. If it's shorter, we'll be back for a little shorter.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. And We are back on Soccer Today. It's with great pleasure that we welcome from the Swope Park Ranger color commentator on the YouTube broadcast, Mr. Alan Engel. How you doing, Alan, today?
Not too bad. And actually, I'm the public address announcer, but that's
neither here nor there right now. No, someone who watches
exactly.
a lot of Swope Park Rangers games, Alan. I do appreciate
that. Is it?
You're taking time. Let's start with in a general what it's been like to experience this inaugural season of Swope Park as someone that's on the ground. How has this team been embraced by the community around it, and how exciting has it been to watch it grow as a club?
It's been incredibly exciting to watch it grow as a club. I mean, the fact that they were in 13th place in June and then managed to finish 4th and get to the USL Cup final has been pretty amazing, especially considering the conference semifinal against Orange County Blues when they went down to 9 men and still managed to find a winner in extra time. As far as getting embraced by the community, the attendance isn't as high as they would like, but I'm sure that'll come with time.
Fair enough. Turning our attention, like you said, it was a massive turnaround from the middle of the season until now. Mark DeSantos is a guy that has had high success wherever he's coached. Do you think it's just a matter of the players finally catching into what he was teaching at that point? Has that been why they've been so successful in the second half?
I'm not. I think, yeah, that would probably be fair. Mark seems to be, from some of the stuff I've watched of him, he seems to be a guy that players want to run through walls for. And from talking to him and some of the other guys over the last few days, nobody ever really got down on each other. They weren't throwing each other under the bus. They were always positive. And I think that was part of what allowed them to keep going and then get through that rough stretch.
Now, heading to the USL Cup final this weekend, Alan, what was the most impressive you have been in the playoff this year so far? We have seen penalties. We have seen big games, big win like the 3-0 against Vancouver. What has impressed you the most by Swope Park in this playoff season?
I would say it was probably the heart. The fact that they went down to 9 men against Orange County and yet still found a way to win. There should have been no way that a team down to 9 finds a run of play winner in extra time. But they did it, and it was because they believed in themselves. They had faith. It's like, yeah, we're going to get this done. And that's been the most impressive, I think.
And when you're looking at the future for Swope Park, yes, there's a big game left this year. Mark Dos Santos is moving on to the San Francisco Deltas. So, yes, it is his second final in 2 years in team that he's actually moving on from. What do you expect Swope Park to take from this year, if there's a championship or not? And then what's the offseason going to be like?
I think they've got a chance to have some continuity, because I think what they're talking about is promoting one of the assistants to take over the head job. So I don't think there's going to be that much change. That and the culture that they're building under the Sporting Kansas City umbrella is one of a winning mentality. So that's definitely not going to change. So I don't see a whole lot changing. I mean, there might be some bases that change, but I don't think it's going to be anything monumental.
Alan, let's turn our attention to the season in general and give a bit of a primer for those that might be tuning in to watch Swope Park for the first time on Sunday. Who are the players to watch on this team? Who have been the outstanding performers in your mind this year?
I would say probably one of the big names is Amir Didic, one of the center backs. He was best 11 as first team as a rookie. He is, born in Bosnia, I think, but did most of his growing up in Edmonton. He's been a big part of it. Him and Omar Ballo, both in the 15 games they've played together as central defense pairing, they are 13-0-2. And I'm trying to remember the last goal they gave up at full strength, and I'm having a little trouble because they've been on such a good run defensively.
Now, when you're looking at this team heading into this game, what are the strengths of Swope Park in your opinion, Alan? What is their key to success on October 23rd?
I think, like they've said, it's going to be sticking together defensively and making the most of their opportunities going forward. Dean Kelly scoring the game winner against Orange County Blues helps. He'll be going forward. I think Tyler Pasher, another Canadian, will also be going forward. So as long as they can stick together defensively, their confidence is high enough that where they're thinking we're pretty much invincible at this point, and they think they can beat anybody, and they probably can.
Alan, it hasn't been the best of years at the senior level for Sporting Kansas City this year. They're still in with a chance to continue on in the playoffs, but nonetheless, I think expectations at that club are pretty high usually, and this has probably been a little bit of an underachieving season for them. Is this helping fans of Sporting Kansas City that maybe are a little more casual at the Swope Park level? Do you think that Swope Park's success is helping ease the pain of a struggling season at the MLS level a little?
Maybe a little bit, but they're not going to be very public with that. Peter said today in the news conference that the first priority for the Rangers is not necessarily winning. It's developing players for the senior team. I mean, the fact that they're winning is great, but that's nowhere near the top priority. Instilling the winning mentality in their players is, and that's something that Mark Dos Santos has excelled at. And I think they might be taking some solace from it, but they will not say so publicly.
All right. Well, and speaking of which, is there anyone on that club that you feel has a real good chance of maybe getting a homegrown opportunity next year?
Let's see. Maybe Nansel Selbel scored the game winner in the CCL game last night, and actually could have had a hat trick if the goalposts were like 6 inches further apart.
Fair enough.
Hit the post a couple of times. I think Chris Tierpak could probably move up to the senior team. He's put in a lot of good work for the Rangers, and somebody that's come on lately, Adrian Zendejas, the 20-year-old goalkeeper, has been really impressive, and I would think he might have a shot at going to the first team, if not next year, then fairly soon after that.
You mentioned, Alan, that there was press conference. is there an increased amount of attention now that they're in the final? Are they getting a little bit more media? Do you think you'll get a few more people watching the game on ESPNU?
I think so. I think there were 3 or 4 TV stations there for the press conference, and that's not something they get a lot of, or at least not something they've gotten a lot of up to this point. So hopefully they'll get some eyes on the team, and they're a fun team to watch. I mean, if they've missed, if people have missed the season so far, I would like to think. I know, granted, I'm probably biased, but I'm thinking they'll be impressed with the level of talent that Swope Park Rangers and Sporting Kansas City have assembled in this group.
All right. If things are going to be successful for them to win that game on the road on Sunday at 8 p.m., what do you think, 8 p.m. Eastern, what do you think Swope Park needs to do? How do they ensure that they're champions at the end of this game, Alan?
I think what they need to do, what they've been doing, staying compact in defense, and making sure they finish their opportunities going forward. There are a couple of people that will not be playing thanks to either suspension or possibly injury in the case of Mark Anthony Gonzalez. But if they play the way they've been playing and they avoid the mistakes that can cost them the game, I have a feeling they will be successful on Sunday.
All right, Alan, I hope you enjoy the game, and all the Sporting Kansas City people that are tuning in for the first time are convinced to come back and enjoy the atmosphere next year. I enjoy going to USL games, as many of us do. Thanks for your time, Alan, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, come back with the NYRB2 side of things.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back to Soccer Today. Duane Rollins here. Joining me on the line from New York is Christian Dyer of Big Apple Soccer and many other things. Christian, thanks for taking some time to talk about the USL Championship game.
Well, don't insult me now, Duane. I'm from Jersey, all right?
Oh,
you never, ever say a Jersey guy's from New York, right, ever.
Fair.
Or your aunt might go missing.
Fair enough. I apologize for that. NYRB2. Let's start with the actual attention that this game is getting right now. It's a big market, obviously, and this is not something that generally packs the place. But do you anticipate you might get a few more people in there to watch this final?
Yeah, as the regular season was progressing into the playoffs, you saw an uptick of interest, and I know New York Red Bulls 2's attendance was a little bit on the decline. That is something I think that will change next year. They are moving to Montclair State University. They're going to have a beautiful 3,000 seater facility there with press box and kind of everything else that you need. And that's a very soccer-rich community. But in a market like this, where you have the Red Bulls, you have the Sky Blue women's team, a host of college soccer, and oh yes, the noisy neighbor across the river, New York City FC. It's been difficult, I think, for Red Bull 2 to gain some traction. But when you look at the last game, there was a good several thousand in the stands. I would say probably about 3,500. I would say for a standalone game on Sunday that they've been promoting, it wouldn't surprise me to see if this number tops about 4,000 or 5,000, which I think would be a good solid number on a nationally televised game. So there is a lot of interest. Fans are starting to buy some tickets, and fans are starting to get excited about a team that set an awful lot of USL records this year.
Yeah, and look, the other part of this, of course, is if you're a Red Bulls fan or even just a fan of American soccer and you want to see the next sort of generation, what that club is doing is promoting a lot of players up. Do you think that the fans look at it, they're more excited by the wins this year and making a final, or do you think they're more excited by the amount of players that they're putting on the full Red Bulls team?
Yeah, I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. But when you look at Sean Davis, who last year got a lot of USL minutes, started this year getting several appearances with the USL. Then when Dax McCarty, the Red Bulls captain, goes down, he became a regular. And you could probably make the argument the midfield played more cohesively with Sean Davis in the lineup. So USL served him very well. Aaron Long has gotten promoted. He's made the bench. He might be a player who sees some minutes on Sunday with the MLS team if he doesn't get loaned down. And then, certainly Alex Mule, who probably won't get it, but is in the mix for the MLS Rookie of the Year, well north of 20 starts. The way that he's played at now just 21 years old, most of the season at 20 years old, he got his big start with the USL team this year. So I think that there's been an awful lot of integration and then assimilation with the two rosters, and that's very exciting for fans in this area. But you talk about a Tyler Adams who could well be on the MLS roster next year. He's been a rock of the USL roster. Fans are excited about him. Derek Etienne, who they're calling the Haitian Messi, just 1 year out of college. He's already getting called up to the Haitian national team, hasn't appeared yet. I think, quite frankly, U.S. Soccer needs to look at this young talent, very technically gifted, a great ability. He's going to have a very bright future in MLS and with the Red Bulls team for years to come. So the wins, the amount of points that Red Bulls 2 have been able to register certainly has opened some eyes. But I think when you look at the fact that they've got so many young, exciting players and faces being integrated into the MLS roster, that has a lot of Red Bulls fans, even if they're not showing up to games, but very excited about it. And if I could just sidetrack for just one moment, there's been an awful lot of things to talk about this year with U.S. Soccer, whether it's been the women's performance in the Olympics or the men getting fourth place in Copa America and a couple of the wins that they've had, or advancing in World Cup qualifying, or the under-23s failing to make the Olympics. But to me, the story of U.S. Soccer in 2016 is about the USL, the continued development of Louisville and Sacramento in their markets, Cincinnati emerging the way they did. And now you have an all MLS final. 3 out of the 4 teams in their conference finals were from MLS sides. This is so big, and it's not being talked about in U.S. soccer circles. But for the development of young players, when you look at just what they're able to get day in, day out, and playing in these professional environments and playing in a place like Cincinnati where there's 15, 20,000 fans screaming down their necks, it really sets players up for the next level. And as these USL rosters get younger, it's only and more academies get involved, it's only going to benefit the game in this country. So to me, the story from 2016, it's the USL.
Yeah, and 3 of the 4 teams in the Final Four of the USL Cup playoffs, of course, were what I call 2 teams, or B teams, if you prefer,
Sure.
the teams attached to MLS. There's an interesting sort of split amongst the approach that the 2 teams take. You get clubs like Montreal and Toronto in particular that play almost entirely kids, and they don't worry at all about the wins and losses. And then you have clubs like NYRB2 that are winning as well. How do you feel that the Red Bulls balance that approach between wins and losses, scoreboard stuff, and actual development? Is there a secret there, or is it just about talent?
Yeah, and I was talking about this with David Goss. I call a number of the USL games for the YouTube stream for the league and for Red Bulls too. And we were talking about this very point just this past weekend, that you've got Montreal and Toronto who have the youngest lineups in the league, and they go out there and get hammered. How good is that for the development of the players if they know that they're going up into environments like Charleston and Rochester and Louisville and Sacramento and Cincinnati, where they're facing players who are 5, 6, in some cases 10 to 12 years their senior. A number of these players have either played overseas, have played at the MLS level before, and they're getting absolutely battered game in, game out. I don't know how that's good for the development of those academy players in terms of confidence, but in terms of just actually being able to go out there and get better when they're getting clobbered and losing 4-5-0 every match. This isn't an isolated incident. These teams just really get hammered week in, week out. And then on the flip side, you've got Red Bull 2. And I said this when I talked about John Wolonek and his credentials to be USL Coach of the Year, that by every metric, Red Bull 2 has been successful. You look at the league record, winning the league, winning the Eastern Conference, first team to make it into the playoffs. Placing 2 players on the USL first team. You probably could make the argument that Ryan Mira, the goalkeeper, really should have been, a first team selection, but he had that injury earlier in the year. But then by the other standard, which is for these MLS teams, not about wins and losses, but really about developing that next wave. And we talked about Sean Davis using the USL over the past season and a half to firmly get a place with this Red Bulls roster. Aaron Long being signed from the USL all the way up to the senior team. Tyler Adams at 17, 18 years old, getting his first MLS start earlier this year because he was performing so well at the USL level. And then Alex Mule, who to me, one of the most exciting young players in U.S. soccer, not a flashy guy, but really fits that hard-working mold mentality, getting, I believe, 24, 25 starts after getting the season started at the USL level. And then Derek Etienne getting some minutes, seeing some time on the bench. Brandon Allen also working his way up to the bench. So it's been, I think, a perfect balance this year from Red Bull 2. And a lot of people thought that this USL team for Red Bull 2 might not be quite as good this year. A lot of young faces. Last year's team made the playoffs their first season in the USL, but there was a lot of turnover and they had gotten younger. But they kept some of the players like a Ryan Muir around, some of the older names and the veterans. And then they blended in some guys who weren't seeing minutes consistently with the MLS team. And it led to what I think was the perfect balance in terms of youth development, but also results.
You mentioned your noisy neighbors there a minute ago, and one thing that I felt when they came into the league that Manchester Football Group, that what they might want to do is really take advantage of the opportunity that they might have to claim part of New York as their own for kind of a talent mining operation, but they haven't done that so far. Are you hearing anything about them trying to start their own USL program, or is that something that it's not really on the radar right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk and rumors over the past couple of weeks about maybe the Long Island Rough Riders going up to the USL. And you have to wonder if that might be more than just a partnership between City FC and Long Island. Of course, Long Island Rough Riders were a top-level team in the old USISL, right? In 93, 94, 95. Chris Armas, Tony Miola played on those teams. And they regularly won championships and drew great crowds to Mitchell Field in Long Island. But, can't help but wonder if maybe that might be more of a partnership. And you look at what Red Bull 2 did this year with developing the young players. City FC has a very deep academy pool in theory if they're able to develop it fully. And I think that they've taken good baby steps right now. But you're seeing this as a team that's still very heavy in terms of their foreign contingent and their veteran players, and really haven't gone after the young players from the New York City area. Their youngest player, most influential player being Jack Harrison, who was a draft pick. And you look at the Red Bulls roster across the river, and you do see a Mule and a Davis and Connor Lade before he was injured. And there's a lot of guys on that roster who are homegrown players. Look at FC Dallas. So I think New York City FC is foolish, A, with their resources, not to consider their own USL team, but B, to not try to integrate more young players and academy players into their roster. It's obviously the way MLS is going as academies get stronger, and right now they're only hurting themselves by not being able to supplement their roster with good young talent.
Yeah, you'd think it would have some ramifications across the pond too if they could find some talent there. New York's a talent-rich area, but let's move back to the Red Bulls too for now, because they are the story right now, obviously. How do you anticipate them approaching the game on Sunday? Do you anticipate that they'll drop some players down in to try and ensure the best possibility of winning, or do you think they'll stick with more of what got them there?
Yeah, I asked Jesse Marsh, the MLS side's head coach, last week, would they consider dropping down Sean Davis, who's eligible. Davis hasn't played now for several matches, and he just kind of said, we've talked about it, we've thought about it, but we like the core that we have right now. And I think this group that's gotten them there, that the spine of this team is really strong enough to be able to go out there and play a team from the Western Conference. I think the East was a little bit deeper this year in the USL, than the West was. So I think that right now with the cohesion they have They've made 9 straight penalty kicks. They've gone to overtime twice. This is a battle-tested group. It's ready. I don't see them necessarily dropping down anyone like a Sean Davis. Now, Aaron Long, that becomes an interesting question for the Red Bulls, because Long is a center back. The Red Bulls are a little thin at the center back position. The senior team is playing at 4 p.m. in Chester, and Aaron Long has been a part of that roster. Do you bump him down then to play in this match and get the minutes and keep him sharp for the playoffs? I think that's probably the only decision that we'll see. And Long was an all-USL first-team selection. So I think he will just come in seamlessly and do well. He's played throughout the playoffs. He's been loaned down. But in terms of any other big names, I think right now you don't want to disrupt what Red Bull has going on.
All right. We have about a minute or so left in our time today. Christian, we do thank you for it. Putting Swell Park.
I've been a great guest, haven't I?
You've been
I've been a great guest. I've been fantastic. I've been knowledgeable. I've been a little funny in the beginning. Right now, it's been great for you.
I absolutely agree 100%. We'll have to have you on next season if you'll give us more time.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back. Thanks to Christian, funny guy there. He's from Jersey, not New York, Jersey. Kevin, you had some breaking USL news of sorts.
Jean-Yves Ballou-Tabla of FC Montreal just signed a contract. It was announced by the Montreal Impact at 11:49. For him, it's great. He is a Canadian U20 as well, continuing his progression, now signing his pro contract. Will we see him make his debut in New England? It will be interesting. He has practiced with the first team many times this season, so it will be interesting to see how he grows in the offseason, how he handles training camp next year. But with 1 game left in this season, Jean-Yves Ballou-Tabla signs his pro contract with the Montreal Impact, homegrown player for the club.
Bit of a funny timing. I guess they probably just want him to get the experience of being around the MLS club.
Striker, attacking midfielder would be the description of Jean-Yves Ballou-Tabla. He is versatile as well, has a great first touch, a great pace, and puts himself in very good position to score goals. So, very interesting signing. And the latest, second this year with David Choignard, that signs a pro contract with the first team.
Yeah, it's a tough game to deal with for Montreal this weekend, because you want to get the home game, but at the same time you don't have full control over it. So, and you also want to be prepared for the rest if you need. It's a complicated game for Biello to handle in terms of his player selection. I don't know if necessarily the signing has anything to do with that, but it certainly does offer some unique challenges when you potentially could be facing a game which we think probably would be Thursday night for the Impact if they were to play in that knockout round. Well, they won't play in a knockout round, so they do have to deal with that. Kevin, quickly before we say goodbye on USL Wednesdays on Thursdays, let's get our thoughts on the final real quick. As Alan said, Swope Park's kind of been a fairy tale sort of ride to the playoff, ride to the final, whereas the Red Bulls have been consistently good all year. So it's a classic kind of underdog versus, it's crazy to consider NYRB to be like the established favorite, but that's kind of what it's played out to this year.
Oh yeah, they dominated the regular season. They won the Shield, and now they're in a position to win the USL Cup. So, no, of course, they do have the home field advantage. They do have the momentum on their side as well. Being able, yes, they weren't the penalties, and it wasn't necessarily easy in the playoff, but it's their season-long momentum that's just continuing.
Yeah. So I do tend to put the Red Bulls as the favorites, although, momentum sometimes matters, I guess. I have yet to prove that statistically and keep meaning to, but nonetheless, it does seem like it matters. So you would hope that maybe there would be a good battle there. The Red Bulls did everything. It took every second they had to get through to the final against Louisville, taking it to penalties that game. They were losing it quite late. So I anticipate this will be a close game. Swope Park is a very defensively solid team. DeSantos obviously is a coach that knows what he's doing. He did, of course, lose that final last year, though. So ultimately, talent sometimes wins out at the end. So I am going to predict an NYRB to a championship. Hopefully they get a good crowd there to cheer them on. It would be a little bit sad to have a championship played in front of 18,000 empty seats, but it is what it is.
Yes, and just a little bit of tidbit information yesterday for Sporting Kansas City in the CONCACAF Champions League game that meant nothing. Kansas City versus Central FC, the same group that Vancouver did win. Cameron Porter of CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinal fame for the Montreal Impact went at it again and scored a goal in the CONCACAF Champions League 2 years in a row. Well, 2 years, one separated by one. But CONCACAF Champions League superstar Cameron Porter.
It does seem weird that that is two CONCACAF Champions Leagues in a row for him. It does seem weird that they're not connected. Well, no.
There was one in between because of his injuries that he missed, but yes.
Yes, very strange there. All right. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to have a bit of an NCAA check-in with our friend Travis Clark tomorrow as our interview. We'll also talk about all sorts of fun and wonderful things in the world of football. But until that time, Kevin, as always, say goodbye.
11 a.m. tomorrow for Soccer Today. Until then, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.